Maggie sighed as she sipped her coffee, staring out of the window at the small bakery below. It was her sanctuary, her lifeline, and for the past 40 years, it had been a beloved staple in the town. Her late father-in-law, Henry, had poured his heart into the place, crafting recipes that felt like home for so many. Now, Maggie and her husband, Peter, were doing their best to uphold his legacy. But life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges their way, and this one came in the form of Peter's younger sister, Laura. Laura had always been a free spirit, the kind of person who floated through life without worrying about the consequences. At 35, she had been married and divorced 3 times, each relationship ending more dramatically than the last. Her latest marriage had crumbled just a month ago, and now she was back, standing on their doorstep with a suitcase and an air of entitlement. "I just need a place to stay until I get back on my feet," Laura had said, flashing her most disarming smile. "You don't mind, do you?" Maggie and Peter had exchanged wary glances. It wasn't the first time Laura had sought refuge at their home, and the last time had nearly torn their household apart. But how could they say no? Laura had a way of making refusal seem heartless, and before they knew it, she was settled into the guest room, a room that had once been Henry's. The days that followed were anything but peaceful. Laura lived as if the world owed her something, sleeping until noon and lounging around the house while Maggie and Peter worked tirelessly at the bakery. She never offered to help with chores, and any suggestion that she contribute to the household was met with laughter. "Come on, Peter," Laura teased one evening. "You inherited this place. The least you can do is let me enjoy it." Peter's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Maggie, however, wasn't as patient. "Laura, this isn't about inheritance. It's about respect. If you're going to stay here, you need to pull your weight." Laura shrugged, unfazed. "Relax, Maggie. Life's too short to stress over little things." Maggie's frustration grew with each passing day, but it was Peter who finally broke. "Laura," he said firmly one evening, "you either start helping out or find another place to live." Laura's eyes widened in mock surprise. "Wow, Peter, that's rich coming from you. Didn't Dad always say you were the golden child? You've had everything handed to you." Peter's fists clenched, but before he could respond, Maggie stepped in. "Enough. This isn't about the past. It's about the present. And right now, the present feels unbearable with you here." Laura stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. But Maggie knew this wasn't the end. Laura was like a storm, chaotic, relentless, and impossible to ignore. One evening, while cleaning up after a particularly busy day at the bakery, Peter had an idea. "Maggie," he said, "what if we talked to Sam?" Sam was the owner of Moonlight, a small speakeasy-style bar just a few blocks away. He was a charming and eccentric character, known for his ability to read people. Over the years, he had become a trusted confidant for Peter and Maggie, always ready with advice or a kind word. The next day, they visited Moonlight. Sam greeted them with his usual warmth, his dark eyes twinkling behind round glasses. "Peter, Maggie," he said, "long time no see. What brings you here?" They explained their predicament, and Sam listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When they finished, he leaned back and stroked his beard. "Laura sounds like quite the handful," he said, "but maybe she just needs a distraction." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "What kind of distraction?" Sam smiled slyly. "Leave it to me." Over the next week, Sam became a regular visitor to the bakery, chatting with Laura whenever she wandered downstairs. He'd compliment her cooking. "You've got a real knack for this, Laura," and regale her with stories about his travels. Slowly but surely, Laura began to brighten in his presence. She even started dressing up, clearly trying to catch his attention. Maggie and Peter watched the transformation with a mix of amusement and relief. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of calm in their home. But Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that Sam had something up his sleeve. One evening, Sam invited Laura to moonlight for a private dinner. She returned home glowing, chattering excitedly about the delicious food and the intimate atmosphere. "Sam is amazing," she gushed. "He's so different from anyone I've ever met." Maggie bit back a smile. If anyone could handle Laura, it was Sam. As the weeks passed, Laura spent more and more time with Sam and less time at home. She'd often come back late, her cheeks flushed and her spirits high. It seemed like the perfect solution until one evening when Laura burst into the living room, her eyes blazing with anger. "Can you believe it?" she exclaimed. "Sam doesn't want a relationship. He says we're just friends." Maggie's heart sank. "Laura, maybe he's just not ready for something serious." Laura shook her head. "No, he's playing games. I can feel it." Peter spoke up. "Laura, maybe it's time to focus on yourself for a while. Figure out what you really want." But Laura wasn't listening. She stormed upstairs, leaving Maggie and Peter to exchange worried glances. The next day, Sam came by the bakery. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice sincere. "I didn't mean to upset her. I thought she understood where I stood." Maggie nodded. "It's not your fault. Laura's been through a lot, and she's complicated." Sam smiled faintly. "Aren't we all?" Despite the setback, Laura's mood improved in the days that followed. She began spending time with a new group of friends she'd met through Sam, and for the first time in years, she seemed genuinely happy. Maggie and Peter watched from the sidelines, hopeful that this might be the turning point they'd been waiting for. Then, one evening, Laura made an announcement. "I've decided to move out," she said, her voice steady. "I've found a place with some friends. It's time for me to start fresh." Maggie felt a wave of relief, but also a pang of sadness. Despite all the turmoil, Laura was still family. "We'll miss you," she said softly. Laura smiled. "I'll miss you too. Thank you for everything." As they helped her pack, Maggie couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a short time. The storm that was Laura had finally passed, leaving a sense of calm in its wake. And as Maggie stood in the doorway, waving goodbye to her sister-in-law, she felt a spark of hope for the future, for all of them. But just as life began to settle, a letter arrived at their doorstep, addressed to Peter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and when Peter opened it, he found an invitation. "What is it?" Maggie asked, noting his puzzled expression. "It's from Laura," Peter replied, holding up the letter. "She's inviting us to her engagement party." Maggie's eyebrows shot up. "Engagement? She just moved out a month ago. Who is she marrying?" Peter scanned the letter again. "It doesn't say. Just that it's someone she's very serious about." Despite their reservations, Maggie and Peter decided to attend. The party was held at a chic venue downtown, and when they arrived, they were greeted by a glowing Laura. She looked genuinely happy, and for the first time, Maggie felt a glimmer of hope that Laura had finally found her footing. As the evening progressed, Maggie struck up a conversation with Laura's fiancé, Mark. He was charming, with an easy smile and a confident demeanor. But something about him felt off. He dodged questions about his past and seemed overly eager to impress. After the party, Peter voiced his concerns. "Did you notice how vague Mark was about his job?" he asked. Maggie nodded. "Yes, and he kept changing the subject whenever I asked about his family." Peter sighed. "I hope Laura knows what she's doing." In the weeks that followed, Maggie couldn't shake her unease about Mark. She decided to do some digging and discovered that he had a history of failed business ventures and lawsuits. When she brought this to Peter's attention, He agreed they needed to talk to Laura. Confronting Laura was never easy, and this time was no different. She brushed off their concerns, insisting that Mark was different from anyone she'd been with before. "He loves me," she said firmly. "And I'm happy. Isn't that what matters?" Maggie wanted to believe her, but the nagging doubt remained. She and Peter decided to keep a close eye on the situation, hoping that Laura's newfound happiness wasn't another fleeting illusion. Weeks turned into months, and Laura and Mark's relationship seemed to thrive. But just as Maggie began to relax, another storm rolled in. Late one night, Laura showed up at their doorstep, tears streaming down her face. "He lied to me," she sobbed. "Mark, he's not who he said he was." As Laura recounted the story, Maggie's heart broke for her sister-in-law. Mark had been hiding a mountain of debt and had used Laura to secure a loan. When she confronted him, he became furious, accusing her of betrayal. Peter embraced Laura, offering words of comfort. "You'll get through this," he said. "We'll help you." This time, Laura seemed genuinely humbled by the experience. She moved back in temporarily, but took active steps to rebuild her life. She found a job, started therapy, and even volunteered at the bakery. For the first time, Maggie saw a side of Laura she'd never seen before: resilient, determined, and self-aware. As the months passed, the bakery flourished, and so did their family dynamics. Laura eventually moved out again, this time on her own terms. Maggie and Peter watched her grow into someone they could genuinely be proud of. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward. And as Maggie stood in the bakery one morning, watching the sunrise,